Ladies and gentlemen, to a very special Friday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. This is a live broadcast. It is the 31st day of October 2014. Some might call it Halloween. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my co-host, my son, fellow investigator Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible 3-hour program, 3 hours of news, information, and analysis therein. I've got to tell you, we've got a very special show planned for you tonight. The first hour, we've got a couple of magnificent guests, folks. And by the way, I just want to tell everyone, for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, just tuning in perhaps, a new listener maybe, our website is hagmanandhagmann.com. You can find all of the information about us on that website. That's hagmanandhagmann.com. We're currently being simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the hagmanandhagmannreport.com. And of course, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're excited about the upcoming conference. We've got two very special people right now on our newsmaker line. I'm going to introduce both of them. First of all, we have Natalina from Extraordinary Intelligence, and she's an extraordinary lady. She hosts a popular EI website, the Extraordinary Intelligence website, and her own radio program, Beyond Extraordinary, which has thousands and thousands of listeners. It's a great program. Her background was once heavily oriented to the New Age movement, folks, and the occult until she became a Christian after a personal crisis. Her website, blog, and radio programs were popular before this change of heart, and today still draw many New Age believers as well as evangelical Christians who study and research topics connected to the supernatural worldview. However, it's with a biblical worldview. We also have with us Mr. Douglas Woodward. This is a fine gentleman I've just been dying to meet in person. Doug is the author of 9 books, including a new one, Uncommon Sense, a Prophetic Manifesto for the Christian Church in Babylon. Mr. Woodward he's an historian of the occult in America, the origin of the New Age movement in America, otherwise known as Theosophy. And, of course, listeners of this broadcast know the origins of Theosophy and the influence of the occult on Hitler and the Nazi Party. Doug also hosts a broadcast, Woody and Wink, periodically available on podcast sites, including theprophecyforum.com. He's been a frequent guest on television show, the television show Prophecy in the News. Just a tremendous guy, and also a tremendous lady, both Natalina and S. Douglas Woodward. Now, you can find Natalina on her website, extraordinaryintelligence.com, and, of course, Doug Woodward has got his website, which is, just faithhappens.com, faith-happens.com. That is faith-happens.com. A little tongue-tied there. Sorry about that. Before we bring them on, Joe, welcome and good evening.
It's glad to be here. It's very exciting to have these guests on. We also have in hour number 2 and 3, Sheila Zilinski and Doc Marquis coming on to continue to talk about what we're going to be getting into in the first hour of this Halloween special. We're going to be talking about some of the pagan elements of Halloween, and Mr. Woodward has a different take on Halloween, how it could be used for good. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Woodward, and let you start off tonight's show.
Hey, well, thank you. It's a great privilege for Natalina and I to join you guys, and we're both fans and frequent listeners to your show, and it's a privilege. This is my first time to be on your show. Actually, I was on the show briefly with Dave Daubenmeier and Greg Evanson and a few other folks a few weeks ago. But anyway, it's great to be here, and we're excited, and wanted to share a little bit about what might be the kind of the question I was posing that Natalina and I thought we might have some fun talking about is can any good come from Halloween? There's traditional views amongst conservative Christians is that Halloween is a very evil holiday, and that it's something that we should, as Christians, not support. and we should stand opposed to. And so we thought there might be too severe a negative view, and there might be some aspects of it that are worthy to consider, and it's not all bad, in other words. So we thought that might be something that your audience would like to hear about, and we might just help people think about it some. And so it's going to be a little bit of a provocateur, I guess, two provocateurs, and so that's kind of where we thought we'd come from. So anyway, so I can talk for just a second about myself, and then ask Natalina maybe to talk a little bit about her background. My background, I'm back here in Oklahoma City. I grew up in Oklahoma. For about 25 years, I lived in New England, and then out on the West Coast, been an executive with Microsoft, Oracle, partner at Ernst & Young, so I have kind of a commercial business background. But throughout that time, I've read and studied about eschatology and American history, really emphasized quite a bit history of the spiritualism in America, the occult. Wrote some books on that subject. I've written other books on topics associated with Bible prophecy, and so anyway, so I'm back in Oklahoma doing some parental care. My folks are 95 and 94 respectively, and we have a new grandchild that we're excited about, and so we're back in Oklahoma now. But anyway, I have the pleasure to write some books and get a chance to speak at conferences, and you guys are going to join us for a conference in Columbus, Ohio, here on 14-15 November at what we're calling A World Turned Upside Down, and we can talk more about that later. But that's a little bit about me, and maybe Natalina, I could introduce Natalina, and she could give a little background on herself. She has an incredible testimony, and perhaps she'd like to share a bit.
Well, certainly, and I just am so delighted to be on the show. It's a real pleasure and an honor for me. Well, as Doug said, my name is Natalina. I have an interesting history where I grew up in Christian circles. My grandfather was a minister, and so I kind of went through the motions that most people do. I went to church, got confirmed, took my communion, all of that. I even taught Sunday school for a while, and at some point I decided that I needed to explore other things, and I walked away from the faith, got very involved in New Age philosophies, got a little involved in the occult, and it's something that I am certainly not proud of, but it has helped to get me to where I am today, in the sense that I started a website during my quest for answers, and it was called extraordinaryintelligence.com. Wrote a lot about the New Age, explored a lot of things that I considered the unknown and the unexplained and the paranormal, and developed a relatively large audience through that. But I was still searching, didn't know really what to believe. And all the while I was suffering from really bad anxiety, really bad panic attacks. And that's part of why I was so desperate in the New Age circles. I wanted to, assume the lotus position and surround myself with white light and all of that mumbo jumbo. I was trying to find this inner peace, and it was elusive to me. Until one night I was researching something for my website. I was researching for an article that I was writing, and I was in the midst of just a horrible panic attack. It was the kind of panic attack where you feel like you're having a heart attack, like you're going to die. And it was terrible. I was sweating. I had tears rolling down my face, and I was probably at rock bottom, the lowest of my low. And as I was just flipping from screen to screen on my computer, I happened to look up. And on the screen, on some website that I somehow ended up on, there was this verse from Philippians where it says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will comfort your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Now, to understand where I was rebellious. I denied God. I was blasphemous. And for me, in that moment, to have this verse show up before my eyes as I'm having this panic attack, telling me from the Holy Bible to be anxious for nothing. I thought, a God who loved me enough, as broken as I was, to sort of reach out to me the way a father does and put his arms around me and tell me that to just not worry and not be scared and not be anxious. In that moment, I gave my heart to Jesus. It was an instant conversion. I believe that he spoke directly to me in that moment and just pulled me out of the despair. The anxiety and the panic just fled from me, and I was changed. I decided to take the website, this platform that I had been given, flip it on its head, and instead of endorsing these New Age concepts and the occult, I decided I was going to use it to expose those very same things and approach everything now through a biblical worldview. And from that point, the blessings on my ministry and what I do have been flowing and leading to all these wonderful opportunities, and I'm just so grateful and blessed. It's led me to places like right here on your show, and to work with wonderful people like Doug Woodward, and to be involved in this awesome prophecy conference in an advisory capacity. It's really been, the blessings have been humbling, and so that's what has kind of gotten me to where I am today.
Fantastic. What a great testimony. And folks, if you're just joining us, that's Natalina. Her website, extraordinaryintelligence.com. Wow, what a great testimony. And of course, we have with us Doug Woodward, and his website is faith-happens.com, as well as theprophecyforum.com. We also have a very special guest joining us right now. This is a gentleman who I just consider a tremendous scholar. He is, oh my goodness, he is a lot
co-author of many books.
Oh, yeah.
Petrus Romanus, Exo Vaticana, The Supernatural Worldview. He's a frequent speaker, guest on many radio and television shows from Coast to Coast AM, Caravan to Midnight, to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And he is a noted authority on paranormal and how the supernatural worldviews underlines a biblical framework of belief. That is Mr. Chris Putnam, who is joining us now as well. So we have just a fantastic lineup of three tremendous people tonight in this first hour to get into Halloween.
And folks, before we bring Chris on, I just want to say this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to hagmanandhagmann.com, that's our website, click on the look for, and you can't miss it. It's a huge red graphic on the left-hand side. It is for the Prophecy Forum Conference in Dublin, Ohio, on the 14th and 15th of November. We hope to see you there. It's my understanding that the seats are, in fact, registration is going rapidly. Space is filling up very quickly. So please, ladies and gentlemen, after the broadcast tonight, click on the link to the Prophecy Forum Conference in Dublin, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, and register for that. It's very affordable. And, of course, we're going to have Mr. Woodward as well as Mr. Putnam there. Other A-list guests that you're talking about, for example, Russ Dizdar, and, my goodness, Chris Putnam will be there, Bill Salas. Yes.
Bill Salas, yeah.
Oh, fabulous. So with that, Mr. Putnam, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Hagmann Hagmann Report.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. I was a little late. I was actually attending a conference and listening to someone that I think is a great scholar. Dr. Peter Jones was actually speaking in my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina, and he's actually from the West Coast, so it was a unique opportunity. So I just barely got in. And, of course, the reason that I was at that conference is because it's Reformation Day. So all of our Christians of the Reformed denominations usually celebrate the 31st as the day Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the door. So, it's a special day other than, the pagan Halloween holiday, and I kind of choose to frame it in the Reformation Day language these days. I think it's better than the kind of generic fall festival thing that a lot of Christians use.
Exactly. That's one of the things we thought about. It was just the fact that there really is a mixture of, sort of some good and some bad both on this day, and from what I've read about the history in America, really for the last almost 180 years. Christians have not been of the same mind about whether or not All Hallows Eve, the recognition of the saints, praying for the dead and so forth, whether it really is a holy day or whether it's a day in which people celebrate witches and demons and so forth. And so it's really been controversial, not just in the last few years, but really for practically, I think it goes all the way back to like 1837 when some books were published talking about the pros and the cons of Halloween. So it's been controversial to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just a little bit about the history in America that I know of. It was really the Puritans, of course, wouldn't have anything to do with it. The Puritans were very much, if it's not in the Bible, then don't do it. And they were pretty strict about that. Now, in the southern part of the United States, you more started seeing Anglicans. And for them, it was kind of just a festive holiday because in England, they really did have some of the Celtic traditions that our Halloween, things are based on, the idea of dressing up and the idea, these are mostly Celtic ideas, but a lot of these Anglicans that came over kind of just had it as a fun holiday, and they didn't take it that seriously. But, of course, it does have, some occultic origins that are concerning. But in my mind, it's really about your intent. I don't think most people have anything occultic in their mind, when they're doing their little Halloween thing. It's more of a game to them. And maybe they are, giving that more power than they should be, but I don't think most Americans take it that seriously. However, there are a growing number of Americans that do take it very seriously and are actually practicing pagans. So we get into a little bit of that in my book and where that's heading. And to be honest with you, I had an experience this morning that kind of shocked me, and I'll just throw it out there briefly. I just put a video up on YouTube on my channel. I'm doing a DVD where I'm going around and examining different anomalous kind of situations. I went to the UFO Museum at Myrtle Beach, and one of the local places that I just visited today is called the Devil's Tramping Ground. It's in Chatham County, North Carolina, and it's really the circular area where, as legend has it, nothing will grow there. And the legend is that the devil comes out at night and stomps around, and that's why nothing grows in this circle. Well, the legend actually goes back before the United States was even a country. I found out that it was written about and people knew about it probably in 1750s, 1760s. So it's really been there for a long time. I went there today, and what shocked me was that I found animal remains, bones of several animals, at least. I would say maybe dozens if it was really all cataloged. But I found skulls, rib bones, jaw bones of different types of animals. I think they're all basically small. It could be cows. It could be some of them are dogs too. But something weird is going on out there. I've never heard anyone finding this kind of stuff before, but I found a ton of bones. And it looks to me like somebody is sacrificing animals at this weird anomalous spot that nobody can explain why vegetation doesn't grow well there. It's been there for a long time. Some of the people that study UFOs have theorized that it's where a flying saucer landed way back in antiquity. Now, that's really hard to prove, but it's an interesting idea. But yeah, I was shocked. Halloween morning, we were out there filming, and we just uncovered this huge pile of bones. And I contacted Russ Dizdar. And I understand he's not able to make it tonight, but Russ is an expert on this sort of occultism where they do offer blood sacrifices and things like that. So I'm going to be talking to Russ, and hopefully by the time I get the DVD out in December, I'll have some information about what's going on out there.
My word. Wow. Mr. Woodward, because there's really five of us on the line here, so what I'll do is why don't you go ahead and moderate this interview. Joe and I'll step back little bit because that way, because the direction that this is going to go tonight. So go ahead and we'll leave you to the task of the moderation.
All right. Well, fair enough. Well, Well, I think one of the main points that we might talk about, and I think it really plays into what Chris has written about in the supernatural worldview, certainly what I talked about in a book I wrote called Power Quest Book 1, America's sort of penchant for the paranormal, that believing in a supernatural worldview is crucial to the Christian faith. And I might throw it over to Natalina, because I know we had talked a bit about this, and Natalina, you might talk a little bit about that aspect of this, that Halloween is this holiday that really talks about, in the old times it was thought to be the night in which the dead returned to their house for one night, but it caused people to really think about the supernatural. And so we're sort of proposing that there might be an apologetic reason why Halloween is an interesting time for us to think about some of these things. So, Natalina, why don't you talk a bit about that from your perspective?
Well, sure. Halloween is one of those things where, in antiquity and even now, it's a time where people are thinking about death, whether it's from a, lighthearted, wearing masks and dressing up like ghosts and telling ghost stories, or if you go back to the origins of the festival called Samhain, which actually looks phonetically like Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. It's a Irish, Gaelic, Celtic tradition that sort of heralded the changing of the seasons. There was only 2 seasons at that time, summer, winter. And winter was known as the darker time, or the dark half, for obvious reasons. Everything died during that time. The days were shorter. It was just darker, longer. The crops wouldn't grow, this type of thing. And so there was always a festival that took place during this time, because in their superstitious mind, they figured that this time there was a thinning of the veil between the living and the dead. And so they would do bonfires, and they would wear masks and this type of thing to scare away anything sinister that might be coming through. So that's kind of the origins, which in some ways it's relatively benign compared to what more modern occultists do with the celebration of Halloween. And yes, it absolutely has been usurped by various practices of witchcraft and occultism, and they celebrate their festivals on this night. But, coming from someone who used to have just a strictly secular worldview, or probably a supernatural worldview, but certainly not Christian, I can say that the interest in the supernatural is there, and it is there, as Chris rightly points out in his book, The Supernatural Worldview, for the majority of the population. More people believe in ghosts and UFOs than they do in God. So the fact that so many Christians focus on the negativity of Halloween, and almost to the point where they're pointing an accusing finger at people who celebrate and say, you are accidentally worshiping the devil, when you participate in these activities, I think that might be a little bit of a wrong-headed approach, because to me, Halloween presents an opportunity to take people who are already thinking about things like death and ghosts and the supernatural, and actually get them to think about it from the Christian perspective rather than just being condemning about it. I can say from where I was a number of years ago, before I was a Christian, I can even remember one Halloween night flipping through the channels and landing on a program that was Christian, and it was talking all about how, anyone who participated in Halloween was evil. And to me, that just, I turned it off. I didn't want to hear that. Now, if we can approach it from the aspect of those of us who have ministries, write books, blogs, radio shows, if we can approach it from the standpoint of taking this thing that people are already interested in and present the truth of the supernatural realm to them, I think it presents actually a really awesome opportunity. I mean, if everybody's thinking about death at this time of year, certainly it might open the door to think about what happens when you die and these types of things. So while I definitely acknowledge that there are some nasty, sinister things that happen on Halloween. I think that we don't have to always give so much credence to that, and maybe more kind of like the way Paul did at Mars Hill, go to people where they are and take what it is that they're accustomed to and flip it and use it as an opportunity to reach those people, and then, present the gospel to them in such a way that they would be receptive to. So that's kind of my approach with Halloween.
Chris, that's great, Natalina. Chris, you in your book, I was refreshing myself today with just some of your writing in your book, and I think one of the key points you make is that so many Christians are sort of practical naturalists in the sense that, the supernatural worldview, I think all of us on this program would agree is very essential to understanding the nature of God, to understanding, the context in which the Bible is speaking. And yet so many Christians really don't hold to a supernatural worldview. And that strikes me as just perhaps one of the most vital aspects of why you wrote the book. I'm wondering if that's true and if you could speak to that.
Well, it's absolutely true. And, that idea is it comes into clear focus when you start studying biblical hermeneutics. And this is really where, I became convinced of it. But then, I read some papers by missiologists. And these are guys that have PhDs in world missions. So they typically teach at seminaries, and their whole focus is, how do we evangelize other cultures? Now, one of the scholars who I read a paper and I quoted in the book, his name is Paul Hibert, and, he called it the flaw of the excluded middle. And so what he's talking about is, we live our daily lives basically in the natural realm, where things all have a rational explanation along the lines of physics and science, and, everything kind of is explainable by physical laws. But then, there's this whole middle realm, and this is where a lot of modern people tend to just ignore, even Christians, because the middle realm is all the stuff that can be questionable. It's all the weird stuff, all the paranormal stuff, angels, demons. So we acknowledge that those things sort of exist. We just don't know, where they fit in exactly. But then, everyone as a Christian acknowledges, God as the ultimate supernatural reality. So that's the upper story. So we all kind of acknowledge God, and we worship this supernatural creator on Sunday. But then, Monday through Friday, most of us live our lives pretty much in the lower realm, and we don't really think about the middle realm. But in the Bible, there's a very active middle realm. And the authors of the Old and New Testament saw the world much differently than we do. They had a pre-scientific worldview. They weren't trying to rationalize, the physics of how things happen the way that we think. They didn't go to school and learn the sorts of things that we learned. Their explanation for most things was some kind of spirit or something of that nature. And they were wrong some of the time. Some of that we today, we call it superstition. And, they certainly probably had weird beliefs about the weather, and things like that we can explain in natural terms these days. But they were also right about a lot of things that we try to explain in natural terms these days. And that's where there's a challenge for a modern Christian, to have the appropriate level of skepticism, the appropriate level of, where's the supernatural begin and the natural? And that line is not always super clear. But, most of us, by and large, live in the natural realm. And, most stuff that we hear about the supernatural, if it's not something directly about God, then we tend to be skeptical. And, that's not always a bad thing. But I think overall it's not serving us well in the new cultural paradigm shift that we're in, because people, aren't really naturalists so much anymore, but they're not Christians either. So they really have a lot of spiritual beliefs that are anti-gospel. And if we're not addressing them in the appropriate way, we're not even really communicating.
Well, that's, one of the things that you talk about in your book, and it's so, so apparent that if we went back 50 years and we talked about theology in America, you'd be hearing about God is dead. Where is God in sort of the natural realm, because we no longer really believe in a supernatural realm. And then you sort of fast forward to starting about 1990, and certainly in the last 10 years especially, you look at the movies, you look at the TV shows, the Ghost Whisperer, all the haunted houses, people out doing ghost hunting and so forth. And, and I think that's really at the heart of what we're talking about in terms of, the culture shifted. It's moved away from a very naturalist, empiricist. The old philosophical word was sort of a positivist, where you just absolutely don't believe in anything other than just what you can see, and there's nothing beyond that. But the culture shifted, hasn't it, from that kind of perspective to perspective in which, strange things can happen. There can be these demons and exorcisms, and you might speak a little bit to that.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that a lot of the force behind this cultural shift is coming from scientific pursuits. It's just that the evidence that they're finding is, absolutely debunking their own worldview, which is kind of ironic. By their own methods, they're undermining basically their whole theory of reality. But it's true, and some of the empirical evidence, coming from really people who are studying things like psi. The evidence that people have things like premonitions. It really explodes this idea that humans are just evolved primates and that you're basically like a biological robot. I mean, there's just so much evidence coming in now that consciousness, your sense of yourself, is really something apart from your brain. It's not just like a computer. The model that the naturalist has is that you're basically a biological computer and your brain creates your consciousness. But, they're finding all this evidence now from near-death experience research and things like that consciousness can exist when the brain is not even alive. And that kind of thing just throws naturalism out the window. And there's just so much evidence accumulating that, honest scientists who, want to be naturalists, when they look at the evidence, they just can't maintain naturalism and be consistent. So when you start seeing Ivy League type guys, at elite schools, and they're flipping their worldview, when that happens, that really is indicative that the culture is fundamentally changing, because it changes mainly, the big things from the top down. The people that make the laws, the people that write the textbooks that your kids get educated at in school, these are the elites that go to the Harvards and the Princetons and all that. And, I've seen movement there, where we're just seeing them kind of moving to this sort of spiritualistic pagan monism, that what Doug mentioned early on. A lot of this science that they're doing is really reminiscent of what was going on at the turn of the 20th century with the spiritualist movement, when people just started looking into these things. And so that's one of the reasons that I studied parapsychology and researching this book, because that's really where it's heading. It's a new kind of science that's not naturalistic.
Right. And what, I think, Natalina, you might talk a little about kind of the historical context. You talked about it in terms of your own personal experience, but you might kind of talk about the sort of, you might say, cultural milieu that, you were kind of coming to consciousness of when you were into the New Age, and, kind of what's going on in our society. When is this? What's happening? What's changing? What can you tell the listeners about the sort of the New Age movement, how it popped up, and kind of how it impacted you?
Well, it's interesting, because I think people are hungry. They're hungry for something. They're hungry for an experience. They're hungry for a connection of some sort. And what drew me very much to the New Age were these promises of, the buzzwords, oneness, universal oneness, and this inner peace, and this creating your own reality. Those are all of the things that are the promises of what kind of falls under the umbrella of the New Age movement. And that all sounds really sort of hippy-dippy and flower power and all of that, and it really did have that appeal to me. You know, I certainly wanted to have those experiences of inner peace, and that's what I searched for, and that's what many of these New Age philosophies and philosophers did promise. So there's also an edginess involved. I think that just people with their rebellious nature, there's this sort of idea that Christianity is very rigid and that there's no allowance for believing in the supernatural and this type of thing, which is obviously very ironic, but there is some blame, I think, to be had within Christian circles for that perception. It's really interesting. I posted an article on my site just a few weeks ago, and according to a Gallup poll, 73% of Americans believe in some form of supernatural phenomena. That's huge. But at the same time that this poll came out, numbers were coming out showing that church attendance and Christianity at large were at an all-time low. And so where's the disconnect between people almost universally embracing some form or idea or concept of the supernatural and not seeking it in Christian circles? And what can we do to flip that and change that? Now, from my perspective, that's where I was. I certainly had no desire to go into a church to have my questions answered because I didn't feel that that was a welcoming environment. No preacher I had ever met was talking about the things that I was curious about or that I was interested in or that were troubling me. And so I searched and found what I believed were those answers elsewhere in these New Age circles. And now I can say from my personal experience that what started out, as I described, this very flowery and loving type of environment did get increasingly dark for me. It's this path that many people I have spoken to, we all sort of end up on the same path where it starts out really kind of loving and benign, and it gets darker and darker because the search becomes more and more intense. You're not getting fulfilled by the surface stuff with the New Age, so you start going more into these occult realms because you're still searching for something, some void that can never be filled. And so I think that is the responsibility now of the church to realize that there are people out there who the hard part is already over. They believe in the supernatural. You do not have to convince them that these magnificent things happen. You just have to give them the direction to understand the source of these things and how to contextualize it. They already have the supernatural worldview. Now people need to have it presented to them through a Christian worldview, which is something that's sometimes kind of difficult, but there are so many opportunities for doing that. Personally, I think Halloween is an excellent time to do that. As I said, there are people already out there. They're sitting on their computers Googling, ghost stories and stuff like that. Give them something to reach onto that can present the truth to them through the Bible. And it's amazing how receptive people will be to that if it doesn't feel like you are approaching them with this condemning vibe, but actually just saying, hey, have you ever thought of it from this perspective? People are very receptive to that.
Kristen, do you think that the interest in ghosts and UFOs and the things that we're seeing in our culture, is it in fact speaking? Natalina seems to be saying it really is. There's sort of this inner yearning that people sort of naturally have within them to discover that there's more to reality than just kind of what we see around us. That I kind of called it a desire for transcendence. It's a sense of wanting to find out that there is ultimate reality beyond what we see, and to some extent that could be perhaps even the yearning for immortality. Do you see that from your vantage point?
Absolutely. Let's just think about, we're talking about naturalism. What does that entail? I mean, it entails that, you die and you just turn into dirt and you rot, and there's no meaning to anything. Naturalism is also deterministic. Now that's, just a fancy word that philosophers use that means that everything is determined. Now, if you think Calvinism is bad, atheism is 100 times worse, because in determinism, everything is just atoms obeying the laws of physics, chemical reactions, and everything, right from the Big Bang forward got set into motion, and it's all going to obey those laws. And so nothing that you think, nothing that you feel, or your opinions about anything, none of that matters. It's all been determined right from the very impetus of creation, or basically whatever they want to call it. Self-creation is what they would call it. But so everything is just molecules wrecking into each other. There is no such thing as truth. I mean, there's no such thing as trying to find a scientific theory. It all makes it all meaningless. It's all just matter in motion. This is the naturalist worldview. It's hopeless. There's really no ultimate meaning. There's no hope. There's nothing. The fact that you look at your child and that you love your children. A naturalist loves his children. I'm sure that they do. But if they really are consistent with their worldview, that's meaningless, and there's nothing to it. But see, people cannot live that way. So even the most staunch atheist, the most staunch naturalist, he's not going to hold that view consistently, because he's not made to live that way. He's made in the image of God, and he can't help but to love his children. All right, and it's just something that is built in. Like you said, it's this yearning. Now, in Scripture, in the book of Ecclesiastes, you find a man that's searching for the meaningless of life. Everything that I've tried to do, I've built everything, I've had everything that wealth can buy, and it's all just meaningless. And this is kind of what he's coming to, this conclusion in the book of Ecclesiastes. And, he even said that, he's talking about God. He said, God has set eternity in man's heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So it says that God has put this in our heart, and I think that that's true. And so most people have a sense of wonder when they look out at the stars at night and just see how massive the universe is, and we can't even comprehend how big it is. But just what we see, for most people, that sense of wonder is enough for them to seek God, to seek that there must be something more than me out there. But, this is the message of science and the naturalist message that we've been indoctrinated with in the West, really for only the last 150 years or so. But people have really been indoctrinated with the idea that there's nothing special about any of this stuff and everything is meaningless. And, that's what leads...
Right.
That's what leads to things like, the wholesale slaughter of people and the idea that we need to reduce the population. And, the Soviet Union was really the big experiment of militarized atheism. And, you just saw, probably 100 million people were killed, basically indirectly by starving them or putting them in the gulags or whatever it happened. But, same with communist China. It's not just atheism I'm talking about. I'm talking about the whole Marxist, socialist, secularist, atheistic worldview that puts man in the supreme position. And, we've seen what happens with that, just massive carnage. So people don't want to live that way. No matter whether they say they do or not is one thing. People cannot consistently live that way. So they are seeking something supernatural. But when they don't have the Bible to ground them, they'll go looking at just about anything, and that's where all these paranormal ghost hunting type programs are so appealing to people that are looking for something they can hope for.
That's one of the things that I talk about in the Power Quest, the first book, is I sort of trace the history of the occult, the supernatural worldview, all the way back from the Renaissance. And I talk about some of the sort of classic Renaissance men, like Giordano Bruno and Pico de Mirandola, and his name was Cornelius Agrippa, not King Agrippa, but Cornelius Agrippa. These guys were all basically occultists, and yet they felt they were Christians as well. And what they were trying to do, which I think is instructive even in our discussion, is they were trying to figure out an apologetic for Christianity by relying upon the supernaturalism that they saw around them, because then the concept of ghosts and demons, it was more present to them. They saw, and they certainly experienced, witches and warlocks and things like that in their culture. This is in the 16th, 17th century. The Enlightenment had not really hit yet, and so they were sensing these things. They saw these things, and they were trying to figure out an apologetic to reinforce the fact that Christianity was a supernatural perspective. And of course, where they got it wrong, which is, that's where I sort of don't want people to misunderstand what we're saying. We are not campaigning for the benefits of the New Age movement or the occult or anything like that. I've actually been accused of that just very recently. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that we share, with the occultists, the view that there's more to reality than just what we see. And yet where we really disagree is that we believe ultimately reality has a personal quality to it and a moral quality to it. And ultimately that's because we believe there is a God who is a person and who is moral and who believes in, good and the distinction between good and evil. And, we don't really have time. It'd probably lose some of the listeners to talk about dualism versus monism and to talk about the nature of evil from that standpoint, because there's so many interesting, Manichaeism and Marcionites and all that in terms of understanding the nature of evil. But, kind of getting back to Natalina and what we're talking about really is that there is an apologetic for Christians to take advantage of the fact that in our culture there is a growing sense of the supernatural, and that we ought to be able to say to people, there are. In fact, this actually kind of happened a week ago. I was at my son's house, and he was hosting a party, and everyone was watching The Exorcist. And I couldn't help but talk a little bit about Russ Disgar, because Russ, like you, Chris, is going to be at the conference we're going to be doing in Columbus, we mentioned before, November 14th and 15th. And Russ, of course, I would say Russ is probably one of the warmest, kindest, nicest, almost cuddly teddy bear kind of guy that you can imagine. And yet, if I was a demon and Russ came in the room, I would be absolutely frightened beyond belief, because Russ is a very powerful, spiritual warrior. He absolutely has been doing it for over a couple of decades, and it's for real. In fact, I guess that might kind of lead to a question to talk about is we talk about spiritual warfare, but if you don't really understand the reality and the proximity of the supernatural just in our daily lives, it's almost like we can be caught by surprise when the supernatural finally pops up and it raises its ugly head, as it were, and we're caught by surprise because we're just not expecting it. And, I don't know, Natalina, if that raises any kind of questions or comments that you might make about just, how do we sort of live day to day in recognition that while, the natural is the normal, that there is a paranormal and there are supernatural things, and living a Christian life involves sort of being ready for that.
Well, it's true because, as Chris mentioned, there's all of this rising interest through media right now in paranormal phenomena. You've got all of these different TV programs, reality TV of ghost hunters and, mediums and all of this stuff, and people are absorbing it en masse. And it's probably more likely than not that most people are watching it from a strictly entertainment standpoint. However, that what they are opening themselves to through watching these types of programs and gaining an interest in these types of things without having that backbone of faith, it can open them up to what would happen if they did have their own supernatural experience. What would they do? What would they succumb to? How would they contextualize it? And I think that's really important, and why it is so vital for those of us who do work in this realm and do have access to people who maybe aren't Christians yet, I'll say yet, but they're looking and they're searching and they're landing on the supernatural worldview, and they're landing on Power Quest, and they're landing on extraordinary intelligence because of this general interest that they have in the supernatural. Okay, so now we have this responsibility to guide those people in such a way that it'll help bring them into a place where they can contextualize it worldview-wise, rather than looking at it as something that is very lighthearted, that is very benign. Because obviously if you're going into these situations actively searching for a supernatural experience, you just might find it. And then what? And then what do you do? What happens next? They show these scenes where people are just saying, let's help this spirit get to the other side, or let's see if we can gather evidence. And to me, I say, well, okay, so to what end? If you don't have this ultimate concept of spiritual warfare and why that is important, you're just kind of walking into the lion's den, and there's millions of people in that position right now. And so it is probably a time in history more important than ever where we can, it's scary on one hand to see how many people are involved in this, but I also think the opportunity that it presents now to reach out to these people who are in this position and explain to them what the possibilities are with these experiences that they're having, or these experiences that they're seeking. People are ready to hear it. I believe that this is the time to go out there and try to share the gospel with these people, and to do it in such a way that is non-threatening, and to say, hey, you might kind of be onto something here. The supernatural is very real. These experiences you are having are very real. So here is what my worldview says that those experiences are, and what you can do about it, and ultimately opens the door to presenting them with biblical truth. I think it actually, right now, we are in a time that is filled with opportunity. If only more people would seize upon that opportunity, we could help and save a lot of people.
Chris, do you feel like that that anyone that's a Christian can really live a sort of exciting, vital, dynamic Christian life without kind of a consciousness of the supernatural? Can you just make it an intellectual sort of exercise? Should you make it an intellectual thing? Or, how vital is an awareness of the supernatural? How vital is that to your spirituality as a Christian?
I mean, I think it's essential. It's, there's no way apart from it. And, I would say everyone who is, a born-again Christian who can think back to a point in their life where they made a decision for the gospel and everything changed. If you can't say that, then, you've got bigger problems than what we're talking about, and you need to reevaluate that. But, if you can say that, then you've experienced the supernatural. Now, the problem is a lot of us are so westernized, and we watch so much television and so much internet that we lose contact with how special all that is, and we just kind of get dulled by the overkill of choices and options and entertainment that we have. That's our danger in the West, is that we're entertaining ourselves to death, literally. All the supernatural stuff is going on. The Lord is communicating with us by the way He arranges our day. And a lot of times we don't even notice it because we're so caught up in ourselves. And, if I can take time to do my quiet time in the morning and read Scripture and pay attention to the sorts of things that happen to me during the day, I can see God working. When I'm obsessed with myself and I'm, trying to accomplish my goals, and I don't so much sometimes because it's too much about me. And it's there all the time, and Christians do see that, okay? Some of the stuff that we're talking about is a little different, and I can understand why many of our brothers and sisters in Christ just avoid it, because there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of lies, a lot of sensationalist stuff that's just trying to make money. And so, they just tend to dismiss everything. And I can understand why, because people only have so much time during the day, and we just don't have time to vet all the material that we're presented with in this culture nowadays. There's just so much stuff. There's more stuff than anyone in history has ever had to deal with. I mean, we're just overloaded with information. Now, I'm a kind of a nerd that sort of likes that and tries to read everything I can and keep up with more than I should probably. And, but a lot of people don't have time. If you're raising kids and working, people just don't have time to handle all this stuff. So I don't want to criticize people for not getting it on all this stuff. I just want to help them start to get it, And I understand why many Christians have avoided these subjects, but the time to start looking at them is now, because our culture has changed. We're not so much a scientifically minded culture now as we are an occult one. And this is a lot about the conference I went to and I was talking about. We have fundamentally shifted in America to very much like pagan Rome. Just like when the New Testament was written, there was a plethora of religious options, okay? You could go to any of the mystery schools and worship Mithra, or you could be a Zoroastrian, or you could, you had the whole pantheon of the Romans. But the main thing you had to do was you just had to agree, that all of these, that the Christian system was wrong, really. Anybody that made this ultimate truth claim was the wrong one. And that's the position we're in now. It's okay to be a pagan. It's okay to be a Wiccan. It's okay to worship the devil. As long as you don't say that anybody else is wrong, then you're free. Then the liberals are all really happy with you. But if you start saying other people are wrong and your way is the only right way, that's offensive. Now, the truth, comes down to that they can't all be right, all right? That's not possible, because they all make contradictory claims about fundamental subjects, like who created the world, what is sin? Is the world even created, or is it just eternal? They all have different answers to that, so they can't all be true. And so what they're asking us to accept really is that they're all wrong, okay? That's the only thing that makes any sense. They can all be wrong, they can't all be true. Or one can be right and all the rest can be wrong. Now, see, that's a logical possibility. When you have all these contradictory claims, only one can be true. Now, they can all be wrong. So those are your options. One's true and the rest are wrong, or they're all wrong. But they can't all be right, okay? But the culture is trying to tell us that they're all right, but they're lying to us. It's really what they're saying is they're all wrong, but we're going to pretend like they're all right and smile. And that's really what's going on. But, the lie is so ingrained and so, enmeshed in this language of tolerance. They use it. They make it sound like the civil rights movement of the late '60s, where it's like racism. It's all just kind of really deeply enmeshed in a lie. It's not about equality. It's not about tolerance. They're the most intolerant, of us that anybody could possibly be. They're fining, people who won't marry same-sex couples. They're fining them. The government is going to make them pay a penalty. How tolerant is that? Why can't they just find somebody else to marry them? Why do you have to try to force these people to do it? How come their beliefs don't count for anything? They can get married by somebody else, so why are you having to find people who don't want to do it? Why do they have to do it? That's not tolerance. So it's all a lie. And, this is where this whole embrace of the occult is coming from. It really is an attack on Christianity. It's an attack on absolute truth claims. It's an attack on objective morality.
Mr. Woodward,
we're coming to the top of the hour, and so I thought I was going to turn it over to you guys. Yeah, and see if you had any final questions or comments.
Well, I just want to say what a fantastic blend of intellectual discourse. This is why I mean I just love this this discourse between yourself and Mr. Putnam and Natalina. Frankly, folks, I learned quite a bit this evening just listening, and I hope you did as well. Folks, for more of Mr. Putnam, Mr. Woodward, and hopefully more of Natalina, hook up with the conference in Dublin this coming 14th and 15th of November. Please do what you can to get there. Again, the registration is people are registering at an incredible rate, so lock your positions in. Go to hagmanandhagmann.com, click on the link, and lock your positions in. I just want to thank all three of you. And for those joining us and wondering who was talking, of course, Mr. Doug Woodward was kind enough to do the heavy lifting here. His website is faithhappens.com. Chris Putnam, scholarly as always, one of my favorite people. Chris, if I could, man, I'll tell you, your books are just fantastic, and your website is logosapologia.org. And we'll be linking that off of hagmanandhagmann.com, as well as Natalina extraordinaryintelligence.com, and your radio show is Beyond Extraordinary Radio, which I'll be tuning into as well. I just want to thank all three of you for your generous gift of your time and your intellect, sharing your information with our listeners tonight.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, and just so your listeners know, if we run out of tickets, they can live stream, and so we want them to look at that as an option as well. And thank you guys, Doug and Joe, for having us on your program.
Oh, well,
absolutely.
It's our pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh,
thanks, Chris.
God bless you all.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Natalina. We enjoyed it thoroughly. God bless you guys. We can't wait to talk with you again.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. And folks, ladies and gentlemen, we will link all three of those websites. Once again, Natalina, which is extraordinaryintelligence.com, Douglas Woodward, faith-happens.com, and Chris Putnam, logosapologia.org. I would encourage everyone to visit their websites. Certainly get a hold of all of Chris Putnam's books. Doug Woodward, oh my goodness, what an incredible man. And Natalina, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Natalina, but I'll tell you something, I can't wait. Just her testimony is just fantastic. Folks, coming up next, surprise, two of our favorite people. Well, of course, Sheila Zilinski, the weekend vigilante. She's the weekend warrior as well. And, of course, Doc Marquis is a special guest. Oh, man, if you haven't gotten his DVD, if you have not, folks,
ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the special Friday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Fantastic first hour. Chris Putnam, Doug Woodward, and Natalina, I want to say Natalina, and Natalina is one of the people who will not be at the Prophecy Forum conference in Ohio, who we will have back on as a guest in the near future, as she has a lot to share. But Doug Woodward and Chris Putnam will be guests there. But without further ado, two friends and partners in our endeavor, Sheila Zilinski. Sheila hosts the Weekend Vigilante on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, has done a fantastic job since she has started doing the Saturday shows. Just the amount of guests and the notoriety of the guests and the information that those shows distribute are fantastic, above and beyond any level of expectation we could ever have. And then now joining her, one of our favorite guests and friends of the show, Mr. Doc Marquis, a fantastic man of the Lord, a great guy, a great friend, and we've had the pleasure to meet him in person at the Orlando Prophecy and the News Conference almost a year ago now. Doc, Sheila, it's great to have you guys on the program tonight. We're going to be getting into the origins of Halloween and the origins of the pagan Halloween that we see today celebrated even by the Christian church. Welcome, guys.
Well, how are you folks doing today?
Doing great, Doc. It's great to hear your voice. It's been a while. It's been too long. We sure do appreciate the time you're spending with us tonight, coming on, and it's great to have you back.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. This is probably, beyond any shadow of a doubt, my favorite radio shows to do. I love you guys there.
Well, we love you too.
Gotcha, Doc.
And this is your area of expertise. And I can't wait to get into some of these issues and discussions with you, not only examining the pagan origins of Halloween, but of various other religious holidays or holy days the Christian faith celebrates.
Oh, yeah. My goodness. Tonight and the last 2 nights of all the nights on the calendar, oh, my goodness, the most dangerous nights in existence because, as you folks well know, it's the highest of the 8 nights of human sacrifice, and this is known as Samhain, or what some people simply think is called Halloween.
Well, it is Halloween night, and what better night to have on our occult holiday specialist, the guru, the kingpin of knowing about occult holidays, really, than Doc. So I thought it'd be awesome to really get into some of these pagan holidays. Now, if listeners listened Tuesday, Doug and Joe, I did a pretty basic overview of Halloween, and really thank goodness and really want to attribute a lot of my, I spent years studying Halloween, and I never really got into the depths. I kind of did some surface research, but I never really got into the guts of Halloween, if you will, until Doc Marquis. I really want to give him kudos for getting into the real, the underbelly of this holiday. And how it started, he just said, the Nights of Samhain, what a deeply occultic, horrible night. And what better guy? So I really want to thank you for, short notice coming on, Doc. And as I said on Tuesday night, Doc, most of the Luciferian Illuminati have twisted and perverted and totally messed with our calendar and the dates to infuse their ritualistic occult pagan holidays or holy days, which is, what that word means. And Illuminists, as we've talked about, you and I before, really observe 8 major human sacrifice nights, and those are, as we talk about, December 21st, Yule, February 1st, Imbolg, March 21st, Ostara, May 1st, Beltane, June 21st, Litha, August 1st, Lunisod, September 21st, Mabon, and, of course, tonight, Nights of Samhain. It's part of those nights. What is really messed up even more than the holidays are the Olympics. We're not going to talk about that, but, it's really, what's been happening throughout the years at the Olympics is they're also kind of now a date on our calendar. They're full of dark occultic, ungodly witchcraft and devil worship and summoning spirits. And like I said, we'll leave that for a whole other show. But we want tonight to get into more American occult holidays. And I think, of course, Nimrod's such a theme, isn't he, Doc?
What was that? I didn't catch that last part.
I said Nimrod really is a theme to all this stag god worship, isn't it?
Well, yes. It's from Nimrod that you get what's known as the stag god, the god of the hunt, the winter god, the Yule god, or what's also known as the god of the dead.
The god of the dead, yeah, that's really the kind of the theme. And now I really want to ask you a question, Doc. Nimrod was considered a stag god, but it's really interesting that when you look at early depictions of him, he really almost looks I'm not sure if this is even the same god, but don't you think it has a striking resemblance to the Baphomet?
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's actually more best understood as associated with Moloch. You see, Moloch would have been one of the earliest, if not the first, pagan or false god on the face of the earth. Now, Moloch was often depicted with either one horn coming out of the center of his forehead or 2 horns coming out of the side of his head. That's where, the stag part of this comes in, because through cultural evolution, these gods and goddesses were changed a little according to the various cultures and the various occult belief systems. So by the time it entered into Europe, as you've seen by some of the old cave drawings and such that I put in DVD 2, America's Occult Holidays, he has evolved into basically his symbol, I should say, basically has evolved into a stag creature with many horns, best suited, if you would, for what they call him now, or back then, the stag god, with all the horns and such. But you can still reverse that and trace it all the way back to Moloch in Babylon.
Well, it's interesting, and it's a good segue into the Christmas holiday, because it's interesting that Santa's sleigh is pulled by 8 stags or reindeers, and there's that number 8 again, that human sacrificed infinity reincarnation number. Let's get into, I want to talk about Christmas because, of course, that is the most revered holidays by Christians because it is supposed to be the birth of Jesus, but we actually know that Jesus was not born in the winter, don't we?
No, that's absolutely impossible if we go by what the Bible says. You see, there's 2 major clues in the Bible that tells us he couldn't not have been born in that part of the year, because first was the taxation. We know that Mary and Joseph, being honest people, were going to go, leave Bethlehem to go to pay their taxes as Caesar's decree had declared. And if we go by the historical records, that was nowhere near December. Plus, we also find out that the shepherds were still out in the field tending to their flocks. Now, you can talk to anyone who's lived on a kibbutz in Jerusalem or a rabbi who's been there. They will tell you right now that sheep are never allowed to stay out in the fields beyond the second week of October because it gets too cold for them. So there's no way, going by what the Bible says, that Christ could have been born on December 21st. The fact of the matter is, without getting into any long, drawn-out details, going by what I've researched and what others have researched, it seems Christ was born during the second week of September. Now, the exact date it's going to be almost impossible to nail down. Some will say the 11th, making it 9/11. Maybe that is, maybe that isn't. But one thing I do know for certain is, going by what the Bible says in the historical records, it had to have been somewhere around the second week of September.
Well, let's get into the Christmas tree, which is so fascinating to me. I mean, most of us when we were kids, our dads, took us out to some remote place and we all chopped down a good old pine tree, and it just seems so harmless. But there's really a story to the Christmas tree. I'd like you to get into that.
Did you ever decorate your Christmas trees?
With gold, popcorn, you name it, silver,
tinsel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
oh, yeah. I mean, to this very day. Now, I can tell you, when I was growing up in the Illuminati, we would go out in the forest, we would find the perfect pine tree that would symbolize the winter god. And, I mean, this thing had to be perfect. It just had to be the right shape and everything. And afterwards, we would take an axe, we would cut it down, we would drag it all the way home, drag it through the house, set it up in, one of those metal stands, and then you tighten the screws to make sure it stands up straight. That was always a pain. And then we would decorate it with all types of gold and silver objects and little deity figures that represented the god and the goddess. And, of course, we would put a 5-pointed sow on top of it and all this other stuff. Now, what amazes me the most is this is a practice absolutely forbidden in the Scriptures. I mean, Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. Let me just start everyone else, out with this, and we'll go further. It says, picking it up in verse 1, Jeremiah chapter 10, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them." Now that verse right there, verse 2, is talking about that the heathen were, among other things, practicing astrology. They were reading the signs of heaven. Now, it drops into verse 3 then and picks it up and goes, for the customs of the people are vain. Now, listen to what God says is vain here, that we're not supposed to have anything to do with. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the axemen, with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. Could someone please tell me what God was describing there?
Sounds like that Christmas tree with that little stand that holds it in place.
Exactly, and they're decking it with gold and silver and all types of things like that. That's exactly what God's own word says, and we're not supposed to be having anything to do with it. Now, it goes further. Now, I'm going to read to you the next couple verses, because there are some people out there who are trying to say what God is describing here is an idol. Now, wait a second. As far as I'm concerned, you don't need to go out in the forest, cut down a whole tree just to make an idol here, let alone deck it with silver and gold. But hear this out. It says, they are upright as a palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil. Neither also is it in them to do good. Excuse me, that's still a tree so far. Verse 6. For as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great and mighty. You know, and these people are trying to tell me that that's really describing an idol.
What's really interesting is, you know, just like at Rockefeller Center, they always have that massive, traditional, big, huge Christmas tree, and there's always that 5-pointed star. Of course, I don't know if people know this, but that address is 666. That's always wonderful. And then there's the 3 red 6s that glow on it. But at the base of that statue, Doc, is Prometheus, the pagan god of illumination. Get into that a little bit.
Oh, you remember my DVD quite well. Very good, hon. Yes, at the base of the Christmas tree. For any of you folks who want to do this, I would suggest you type in Rockefeller Center and Christmas tree with Prometheus, because at the base of the tree you will see a statue. It's a gold-toned statue. It's Prometheus. And Prometheus, according to the Greek legends, was a titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. Now, this fire, symbolically speaking, represented hidden wisdom. Now, when we apply this to the Christmas tree, we're talking hidden occult knowledge now. This is what it's referencing when you put the two together. But, again, when you think about this, ladies and gentlemen, why would you have a false god with a Christmas tree if the Christmas tree is supposed to be something Christian?
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing. Well, lights and candles are also on Christmas trees. You know, they used to have those little, back in pictures, if you see from the 1800s, Doc, they have actual little lit candles that were on those pine trees. Lots of lights depicted, you know, lights, people have them around their house, electric lights. Those lights are actually very indicative of something, aren't they?
Oh, yes. You see, even though I'm a child of the 50s, and the first person who says 1850s, get it. We used to put little candles on our trees and light candles and put them on the windowsills. You see, because this is the time of the year when it was dark outside, you know, the last 6 months of the year, from this, October through March, supposed to be the dark time of the year. Well, followers of the ancient gods and goddesses would place candles on the trees and on the windowsills so that the stag god, as he was passing over your house, would see the candles and know that you were a follower of his, and he would bless you because you were his followers. Nowadays, we've modernized it. We've just put up Christmas lights on the trees around the house, and they still put candles, electric candles in the windows. But that's what you're doing when you put those lights on the tree around your house or in the windowsill. You are still, whether you realize it or not, you're asking for the stag god's blessings over you and your household for the season of Yule.
Well, yeah, it's really a re-rendition of the pagan celebration of the December 21st human night of sacrifice of Yule, really, isn't it?
That's all it is.
So what about mistletoe?
We know that. Much more to it than just that, because when we talked about the Christmas tree, how they were decking it with silver and gold, in the occult world, the stag god is always denoted by gold. The goddess is always denoted with silver. The reason this is so, among other reasons, the sun is golden in color, and the stag god is the sun god. The moon goddess is depicted with a crescent moon, and remember that old song by the night of the silvery moon? Remember that one, Doug?
Oh, I do.
That's where we get it from.
Too. Yeah.
The silvery moon always represented the goddess, just like the golden sun always represented the god. This is why you use gold and silver to decorate the Christmas tree. And on top of the tree, if you note, we have a 5-pointed star, and it's always been the 5-pointed star that represents the stag god or Nimrod. And just as I said before, it's the crescent moon that denotes Semiramis, or the goddess. You see how that works?
I find that fertility goddess is really, she's very much a theme woven through all these pagan holidays, too. The stag god, the Semiramis, the fertility goddess, the goddess of spring. It's really incredible how these have got so pagan. I mean, it's just so pagan, and yet we just think them harmless. It's incredible.
Well, no, because you see, the reason that they came, shall we say, to our day and age, is because once God had confused the languages at the Tower of Babel, after Nimrod and Semiramis, his mother, started the first religion on the face of the earth known as witchcraft, God had confused the languages, and everyone started wandering throughout the earth. Now, just because they started going throughout different parts of the earth, starting new countries and cultures, do you really think that they forgot their occult religion?
Probably
No,
not.
of course not. They took it with them. This is why you see the exact same gods and goddesses throughout various cultures and nations. It would have gone from Babylon to Egypt, then to Samaria, to Mesopotamia, then to Rome, Greece, the British Isles, and eventually here in America, so on and so forth. The only thing that ever changed were the names according to the linguistics of the country or nation that it ended up in. That's the only thing that ever changed. Everything else remained the same.
Well, I want you to touch on mistletoe, because it's a real pagan, poisonous, sacred fertility plant, and it was used by the Druids. And we know that
mistletoe is one of the 3 most sacred plants in the Illuminati world and in the Druids, when the Druids were reigning on the face of the earth. As you pointed out in that show you did, the 28-minute one you did not too long ago, Sheila, from 900 BC through 900 AD. Oh, yes, hon, I was listening to the show. And, mistletoe, if you notice, people hang it up over an archway or a doorway or some clever place where they can, steal a kiss from someone, correct?
Yeah.
Well, that's my use for it, Doc. But
well, the reason that tradition came about is because the plant itself, as it says, it's one of the 3 of the most sacred plants in the Illuminati system and, of course, in the Druidic system. But it's sacred because it's also a fertility plant. It represents the goddess, fertility. That's why you give a kiss. But mistletoe is extremely poisonous if you don't know what you're doing with it. Just 3 berries alone and you can kill someone.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, that stuff is dangerous.
Give me that formula again. Give me that formula again. I got some. Yeah,
Doug's gonna mix up a batch for Barack Obama.
I got some special tea to send out. No.
No, I'm just waiting for Joe to send me my cup of coffee.
Well, yeah.
You think I have forgotten after all this time? No way.
I got to tell you, what a disappointment, ladies and gentlemen, at the Orlando conference. I couldn't get him up to get Doc a cup of coffee, for crying out loud. But anyway. Yeah.
The point is that the Illuminati, Doug and Joe and Doc, they claim to be the modern-day rendition of the Druids. And so you can see all this very occultic, satanic type of Luciferian practice interwoven into every single holiday. Stockings were originally gifts for the stag god of death. The colors are very significant. The symbols are very significant. Santa Claus.
Wait. If we're going to talk about the colors, let's not skip over this. This is too important, hon.
Okay, let's go into colors.
Well, you see, the 2 main colors of the Christmas season is red and green. And with every season in the occult world, every season has, specific colors. Just like for the transition of Samhain into, the New Year, the 2 main colors have always been orange and black. That's why, among other things, you see all this, orange and black in the Nights of Samhain, or what they're calling Halloween. Like with the pumpkin. The costumes with witches, and then, of course, when you go to their Halloween parties, you always see orange and black crepe paper, and these people have no idea why they're doing it. Another one of the sacred plants in the occult world is holly. And if you notice, holly is a red berry with green, fits in perfect with the colors of the season. But holly is used because it represents the holly god, or what's also known as the stag god of the Yule season. Now, I can pull out and show you a lot of very old, and I mean old, Christmas cards from England that will show you what the holly god supposedly looked like. And when we take the holly god, compare it to, what Santa Claus is supposed to look like, the same person.
So he's basically the Mr. Holly King himself.
If we wanted, if we also want to add to that, in England, England and certain other parts of Europe, he's also known as Father Christmas. And some people are still, in various parts of the world, like in Amsterdam, they refer to him as, St. Nicholas. And there's a bunch of other names, but it's still the same stag god, just given another name according to the culture or nature or nation it's ended up in.
Well, it's kind of interesting that Santa, if you rearrange, shuffle a few letters, it has the name of somebody else we know. But also this character is all omniscient. He's all-knowing. He knows if you've been naughty or nice.
Well, you see, if we go to Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 14, we find out that Satan fell out of pride. You see, in his original names, Lucifer, he was, going by the book of Ezekiel, the most perfect of all of God's creation. He literally was a being of absolute light because, among other things, his being was covered literally with all types of precious gems and such that would be reflecting, the glory of God off of them. He had, if you read the account in Ezekiel carefully enough, you find out that he had pipes built into him, and if I understand it correctly, it would have been around his throat, and he had little tablets or symbols that was part of his being also. So when he also flew around the throne of God, he was also an angel of music, because the little tablets would be vibrating, and when you push wind through a pipe, it makes music, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And when we look at all these things about Satan, I mean, this was, the most unique of all the angelic creatures he ever created. So we're talking about a being who was at the highest of heights, but because of pride, he fell. See, the scriptures teach us that 5 times he said, I. It starts off with, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cast down to the ground, which didst weaken the nation? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will arise into heaven. And when we get to the last of the 5 I's, he said, I will be like the Most High. You see, the whole of it goes, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cast down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, here's the first I will ascend into heaven. Okay? Second one, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Next one, I will sit upon the mount of the congregations in the sides of the north. Fourth, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. And number 5, I will be like the Most High. He fell from pride. Now, he is still trying to get his followers to perceive him as being as God through the Christmas story, because we know that there are 3 omnis that are denoted to God. He's omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. Omnipotent being all-powerful, omnipresent being everywhere at all times, omniscient, all-knowing. Now, when we apply these 3 omnis to the Santa Claus story, well, according to the Santa Claus story, when Santa Claus is making up the list of the little boys and girls, what is he basing that on?
The fact that he knows if they're naughty or nice.
Who's been naughty or who's been nice. Now think about that. That would require omniscience. How else could you know if anyone's been naughty or nice in this life? Well, he must be omnipresent, or at least after a fashion, because somehow this person is able to go around the entire world, drop off billions of presents in less than 8 hours. And
maybe he's driving a Dodge Challenger. I don't know.
But there's something also that's interesting if you check the ancient tales carefully. According to one of the renditions of the Christmas tale, Santa Claus is able to make a scrying glass, or what you call what is it called?
So like a looking glass?
A crystal ball.
Oh,
he can make one. He can make one out of snow, because if you check the story carefully, the winter god taught Santa Claus how to do that. So Santa Claus can now look at who's been naughty and who's been nice through an act of witchcraft.
Wow.
And his elves aren't much better, are they really? They're kind of little imp. Well, they've evolved since those cute little helpers since the 40s, but in ancient pictures they weren't too cute, were they, Doc?
Well, you see, thanks to such modern-day movies such as The Lord of the Rings and other things, elves are no longer depicted as they used to be. Elves now are these tall, lean, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful-looking creatures. But if you go back to the old country where I'm from, you're going to find the story is a lot different. These were small imp-like creatures that went around throughout the season, causing no end of havoc to anyone who happened to live in that particular house. I mean, these were demonic creatures. Now, people think of elves, we think of the Keebler elves, in the cookie commercials.
You know what,
green,
Doc?
Yeah.
Let me just kind of take a few steps back here, because I'm sure people listening to this are going to say, something. First of all, you destroyed my fun for Halloween. Of course, as Joe and I adjust our costumes of the Grim Reaper and whatever. But no, I'm kidding about that. But the explaining about the pagan origins and the pagan rituals of Halloween. Now you're actually going after Christmas, and we can all, and if you've lived any life at all, we can all relate to the warm fire in the fireplace, perhaps, and serving of eggnog while putting up the Christmas trees with the Christmas music in the background. And people may say, and I can almost hear this, oh, it's such a harmless, it brings families together. Why are you tearing this down? Why are you ripping at this?
Well, of course it was meant to bring families together, just like it was meant to bring back the pagans together when we stole it from the pagan religious holidays.
There you
These
go.
aren't Christian.
Okay.
Let's just use a little common sense here. As I said before,
Doc, what is better than goodwill towards men, right?
salvation unto men.
There we go.
Amen. Goodwill towards men is one of the foundations of the UN's, goodwill is one of the UN's planks, and we have to watch the terminology here, because through the language they deceive us.
Well, of course. And you see, now, as I said, let's just apply a little common sense here. History will mete out that no way Christ could have been born on December 25th, and that it was the second week of September. But when we look at the Bible, okay, so many people are saying we're celebrating the birthday of Christ. Now, let me ask two questions here. First of all, do we really know who was born on December 25th, yes or no? Well, I'll get into that in a second. But the one thing we do know for certain is that it couldn't have been Christ. Okay? No way. Right. And when we look at the timing, the season, everything about the birthday of Christ, it couldn't have happened. But what is interesting about this is that when we look in the Bible, the only mentions when Bible are mentioned, the only people who are celebrating birthdays are the pagans, because birthdays come straight from the occult world. You see, it is a common belief that the highest night for any practicing occultist in whatever occult religion you're worshiping in, that your birthday is the highest day for you as an individual witch or Satan, what have you, because that's when your God gave you life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's how they see it. Okay? Now, let me ask a very reasonable question here. Here's the question. It's very straightforward, very simple. Is Jesus Christ God?
Yes.
Yes. Is God infinite?
Absolutely.
Yes. So Jesus Christ being God, Jesus Christ as God being infinite, how could he have a birthday?
Good point.
Wow.
Very common sense question.
Well, we got the birth wrong, so let's take a look at how the death is wrong too. The resurrection wouldn't have. It's very interesting. It's supposed to be the day.
Well, hold on, hon. Before we get into the resurrection, let's get into something important here.
Okay.
And I remember, I literally heard the synaptic neurons firing away madly in Doug's brain last year when we started talking about Christmas. I'm going to give you a lesson here, hon, and all the listeners who's never heard this before. Now, what were the gifts that the wise men brought to Christ, if we go by the story?
Frankincense, myrrh, and gold.
Right. Now, why those three gifts? Have you ever thought about that, hon?
Well, they were considered
Have you ever wondered, Sheila, why frankincense, gold, and myrrh?
It would appear that at that time period they were considered to be quite sacred.
Nope.
Got it wrong. Okay,
nothing
Alex,
to do with it. Now, let's remember one thing. When the wise men went to see Christ in Joseph's house 2 years later, you see, everyone believes that Christ was in a manger. There was donkeys and camels and sheep, and even the shepherds made it there, and there was a host of angels around the whole of it. That is a tradition. That is not scriptures. Colossians 2:8 tells us not to go after the traditions of men. So, drop the nonsense. Let's go to what the Bible says in the book of Luke. We find out the wise men made it to Herod's place. They wanted directions, because they said, we're here to worship the King of the Kings. And, they eventually left, but in the interim, excuse me, when Herod found out, he made a decree immediately that any child 2 or under is to be murdered. Now, the reason it was 2 years or under is because it took 2 years for the wise men to get from point A, where they were over in Asia, all the way over to Joseph's carpenter shop. They did not have plane, trains, and buses back then. They had to make it on camelback and going from one end of the continent all the way, to another place. It took them 2 years to make the crossing. So by the time they got there, and Christ, and, they met up with Joseph, and Christ, and they met up with Christ, they gave him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Not because it was sacred or anything like that, but you see, frankincense and myrrh were the most costliest of all the perfumes to make back then. It was an arduous task to make even an ounce of it. That's why it was so incredibly valuable. Now, God was already providing for Jesus Christ at this point, because remember, any child who was 2 years old or under was to be killed immediately. So you see, Joseph and Mary and Jesus, and if you remember, the angel appeared unto Joseph and said, you've got to leave town. And he had to, because remember, there was a decree on Jesus' head because he was 2 years old, so he'd be murdered. The Lord chose those three gifts because he was already providing for them, because they had to go from where they were. According to the Bible, they went to Egypt and stayed there for the next 11 years. And because they would be wanted, they had to basically live under the radar. And so God provided the most costliest of things so Joseph, Mary, and Jesus could live and, sequester, if you would, without bringing any attention to them. They had all the money and everything that they were going to need so that they could stay quietly in Egypt for the next 11 years until the angel would appear unto them and said, Herod's dead, you can come back now. That's why those three gifts.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, there you go. So now we know.
Makes sense. And wasn't myrrh one of the I can't even think of the name, but it wasn't used to anoint Christ's body, as well?
Yes, it was. If you remember, the lady who took, it was in a jar or something, and broke it on the Lord's feet and was wiping it with her hair.
Right.
And Judas had a freak attack because it would have been a year's worth of wages. He thought, hey, what a waste.
Yeah, that's a full year's worth of money, because that, was put on the body when a person was initially put into, a cave or something like that to, quench the stench after 3-4 days. And she broke the jar, and it was a full year's wages.
No.
But as I said before, let's consider myrrh and frankincense the costliest of all the perfumes, and you could get a fortune for a pure ounce of it. And that's why, as I said, those three things, frankincense, gold, and myrrh, because God was going to provide for them while they were living in exile. This way, Joseph wouldn't have to work, because it was known he was a carpenter, and they'd be looking for a carpenter. Joseph wouldn't have to work. Him and Mary could, just live a quiet, sequestered life in exile without raising any suspicion.
Yeah, I guess instead of saying they were considered sacred, it would have been better to say very coveted oils, this frankincense and myrrh. Well, we got the death wrong, got the birth wrong. Let's take a look at the death here. So I want you to give people an overview of Easter. I mean, that is supposed to be the day of the year that Christ resurrected. It's, again, woven into this Nimrodian, we know his mother was Queen Semiramis, came back reincarnated as Easter, or the spring fertility goddess, who has that crescent moon. There's that, again, in ancient depictions. Talk about Easter, please.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, Sheila. Have you ever gone to a church where they had Resurrection Sunday or something like that?
Yes, Easter services.
Okay. Right. And the services would begin early,
Good Friday.
And it was supposed to be right at sunrise, correct?
Yes, sunrise on Good Friday, correct. And then it go all through the weekend services.
Okay. Why? Tradition? Was this something you were supposed to do at your church? Because the thing is, sunrise services has nothing to do with Christianity. John chapter 20, verse 1 begins, the first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early when it was yet dark. It was dark outside unto the sepulchre. It's dark outside. I think the God of all that I understand knows the difference between light, dark, sunrise, sunset, and all this other timing stuff. He says it was dark outside. It certainly wasn't sunrise.
They didn't set their watches ahead. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, I don't think it happened that early yet. That was Benjamin Franklin's doing. Thank you very much.
But that's a good point.
It says, ladies and gentlemen, look this up, John chapter 20, verse 1. I'm not making this up. It's in the Bible.
So Ishtar
is that
Easter,
black book that has a lot of dust on it that they haven't opened up for years? That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, but so Ishtar is really Easter, isn't it, Doc?
No. You're saying it wrong, hon. From the Babylonian Talmud, what people are saying Ishtar is still properly rendered as Easter. That's the original way. That's why when we got to our language, it was changed from the I-S-H-T-A-R into E-A-S-T-E-R, Easter. It's still pronounced Easter in the Babylonian.
So it gets that.
The name never changed.
Okay, it never changed. We've been saying Ishtar all this time.
It's
We're
Easter
all wrong.
or Easter.
Ishtar, okay, Ishtar, whatever. The Talmud, the good old Talmud, right?
Oh, hon, I've read more of the ancient sacred texts than I know what to do with.
Well, you once asked a Catholic priest how does he explain that chicken, egg, and the rabbit
Oh, my goodness. I will never forget that day. And Joe, Doug, you're going to love this one. You are absolutely going to love this one.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered what does an Easter bunny have to do with the resurrection of Christ?
Oh, yeah, we've wondered.
You know? I was explained that as I'm still laughing over this. I still can't get over this. You know, and you eat those little yellow marshmallow chicks. You know, that come 6 in a pack or whatever.
Oh, yeah, come on, the Cadbury Easter eggs here. Come on, those chocolate-filled egg things. Come on, they're great.
You know, and those little yellow chicks, this is how it was explained to me. Well, as the chicken comes out of the egg, so did Christ come out of the grave.
And that was explained to you by a Catholic priest.
I know, it doesn't make sense. There's no in-between explanation, but as the chicken comes out of the egg, so did Christ come out of the grave.
Okay.
I know. I'm still laughing about it in my insanity now.
Wow.
I know. I just can't get over that one. That has nothing to do with, you know, the resurrection or an explanation.
No.
You mean these fuzzy little plush bunnies and the chocolate eggs have nothing to do with Jesus? Really? What a surprise.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. We're going to have to take you back again to the wonderful days of Babylon with Nimrod and his co-founder, Semiramis. Well, you see, let me think. It would have been, Cush begat Nimrod. And and Ham-Shem Japheth. It would have been his uncle Shem, I believe it was. You see, we read in the scriptures that Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, most people don't understand what the word "before" means. You see, this is written in the King's English or in the what's considered the late English period. But the word "before" in the King's English means against. You know, when you're standing before something, you stand against it. Nimrod was not a mighty hunter for God. He was a mighty hunter before or against God. You see, he started his own religion with his mother, the very first one on the face of the earth, known as witchcraft. Contrary to popular belief, witchcraft came before Judaism by a good 1,500 years, and as I said, bring that back to around 4000 BC, something like that, with ancient Babylon. And witchcraft also, obviously, at that point in history, would have preceded Catholicism by about 4,300 years. That's another story, but it's important to remember. Well, anyways, once his uncle Shem, I believe it was his uncle Shem, found out that Nimrod and his mother had set up this new occult religion, according to the ancient stories, Shem, with a number of warriors from the tribes, walked right into the throne room. He grabbed his nephew, dragged him outside of the city wall, and killed him on the spot. He separated his body into, I think it was 10 pieces, and sent them to every single city that Nimrod founded as a warning to the next person who would dare mock God in such a heinous fashion. Well, Semiramis, being the smart cookie she was, pushed the whole of the occult religion underground. Now, while underground, she was telling her priests, and this is an exact quote from the ancient Babylonian Talmud, she claimed she was having, quote unquote, an immaculate conception. Now, where have we heard that one before?
Counterfeiting,
exactly.
Right? This is all counterfeit.
Now,
okay.
And the child she bore, she stated was going to be Nimrod, but come back in another form. and she called the child Tammuz. You see, this is where you get the very first mention and the practice of reincarnation for. You see, you don't die and go to heaven or hell. You come back in another form, supposedly as Nimrod came back in the form of Tammuz. Now, we'll leave that for now because we're going to get into Easter. How did this become, related to the bunny? You're going to love this.
Okay, well, before we do that, let's just take a minute because we're at the top of the hour, Joe.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour break. It would be a great time to take that now, and we'll get right back into where you were leaving us with that on Easter on the other side. So we're going to take the break right now. We'll be right back after these short messages on this Friday, Halloween edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report, this first broadcast. Today, the 31st of October. Tomorrow will be the first day of November, but tonight is Halloween, and we were talking with Sheila Zilinski from Weekend Vigilante. WeekendVigilante.com is her website. Doc Marquis, It's a God Things Production. It's a God Thing Production 777.com. I'm sorry, one more time. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. And we've had a terrific first hour with Doug Woodward and a few other guests, Chris Putnam, and we were talking about the origins of Halloween, and now we are talking with Doc Marquis and Sheila from this last hour into this hour. Well, we will be taking your phone calls, not only discussing the pagan origins of Halloween, but all the holidays that we celebrate in our Christian society. Sheila, I'm going to turn it back over to you for now, and then you just let us know when you're ready to take some phone calls.
Absolutely, and I just want to remind listeners that Pastor Russ Disdor is on tomorrow night. It is I'm telling you, that is going to be one good show. And also, Pastor Stephen Anderson, you've seen him on Alex Jones Lots, who did the After the Tribulation video. He was the cop that was brutally tasered in the checkpoints. It is going to be an excellent show, so just a reminder for that. And, Doc, I got an email from a fellow, a listener. It's a male. He said, listen, Sheila, I have been involved in these holidays. What is the big deal? Listen, it's all about the intent, as the earlier guest said. What's the big deal here? Today it's harmless holidays of gift-giving and time with family. Why are you trying to ruin that for people, Sheila? So, comments?
I'm not ruining anything for anyone. This has already been covered by God more than 3,000 years ago. You want to take it up with someone, you can take it up with God, because this is out of his own words. I don't make this stuff up. I've been quoting the Bible. I've been telling you the occult origins. You want to, have a problem with it, you're coming to the wrong person, because this is straight from God's word, that you shouldn't be doing these things, and these things conclusively come straight from the occult. Now, we can always say, what that man said, it's just harmless fun and all this. You know the intentions. There's an old saying, Sheila, that says the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Nicely done. Well, look at the priestess and the priests that were all garbed out in the ceremonial custom wear to celebrate these spring infertility goddesses. They presented flowers and candy to offer up these. I mean, it really is a respin, a regurgitation, a reinvention of really those holidays, isn't all of this?
Well, that's where it all comes from. And before I forget, let me finish up that last thing. Going back to the Easter Bunny, where did it come from? We see 1 year after Semiramis had died, according to the ancient stories, again, go to the Talmud and the other places. Ladies and gentlemen, look at occult books and such. This is in it. A huge multicolored egg, supposedly, had fallen out of the heavens, landed in the Euphrates River, and washed ashore onto a pile of wicker reeds. Now, out of this multicolored egg, in her newly reincarnated form, was Semiramis as the spring goddess. Now, the goddess of just about every single occult religion you can possibly come up with is always denoted as a fertility goddess. Now, in the occult world, every god or goddess is associated with some type of animal or a totem symbol, something like that. With Nimrod, it was the sacred bull or cow. This is why If you've ever looked at the original Ishtar Gate, the entryway into Babylon when it was rebuilt, you would see a bull with wings and a head on it. That's actually the symbol of Nimrod. This is why, among other reasons, after Moses was in the Mount of Sinai for 40 days and the children of Israel rebelled against God and made a golden calf, that cow or bull, the golden symbol of Nimrod, the bull or the cow, which represents Nimrod himself. This is what God was mad about. They didn't just backslide and make an idol. They were backsliding, going into their cult religion.
Wow,
Think about this.
Yeah, that's
Think about this. When a person backslides, do they backslide into something new or into something old?
Typically old.
Yes, because if you've never done something before, you can't backslide into it. You've never done it before. You backslide into something old. And in this case, the children of Israel had been held in a polytheistic society for 430 years. This is why they knew to make the golden calf. It was the symbol of Nimrod. Now, with his mother, Semiramis, as it says, we go through all the ancient occult cultures, even the ones today. The goddess is always depicted as a fertility goddess. With Nimrod, his symbol was the bull, the sacred calf, that type thing. With with Semiramis, think about this. She's a fertility goddess. They chose the bunny to represent Semiramis because that's the fastest procreating creature on God's earth. You look at the bunny, the poor thing's always pregnant.
Right.
That's why it was the Easter bunny. Easter, it was her bunny. The rabbit denoted through the symbol Easter or Semiramis. That's where you get it from.
Well, and there's that fertility goddess again, Nimrod, known as the Venus de Milo, a fertility goddess, moon goddess. It's always these, even the Valentine's Day. I mean, what's better than nice little cherub boys shooting arrows at people, making them fall in love? But Venus, son, the Amore, he was actually Eros, the Greek god of love. This is also pagan, isn't it? It's unbelievable.
This is all it is. As it says, it's the same gods and goddesses, just with different names, and the religion never changed. It, as I said, it just went from one culture to another as they grew and developed once God scattered them to the four winds at the Tower of Babel. None of it was forgotten. It went with them.
It's just a respin of all the same gods and goddesses, priests and priestess. Isn't that incredible? And yet, it always appears so harmless because, hey, what's nicer than a box of chocolate and flowers and chocolate bunnies? It's all so cutesy, isn't it?
Well, think about this. Does anyone in their sane mind really think Satan is going to try to destroy and pervert Christianity by making it look that he's making a frontal attack and all these things are supposed to be horrifying evil and all that? No. He's going to put it in a package, a nice, well-covered package to make it look like it's okay, it's harmless, it's fun, it's Christian. But when you get to the Word of God and you look at the origin of these things, they're hardly harmless or Christian.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Joe, I think we've got a wall of calls. Of course, we always do. Doc is popular. So, Joe, do you want to man the board?
Yeah, and for those who want to join into the conversation, 661-244-9839 is the number. You press the number 1, and that will prompt us that you are in queue wanting to speak with the host. And we will go to our first caller now. We're going to go to area code 573 first. 573, you're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Sheila and Doc Marquis. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Doc Marquis. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and plus Doug and Joe Hagmann, you guys are just great. And
aren't they incredible? Aren't they wonderful?
Your guests Steve Quayle and the other people that you have are just phenomenal. I just can't get enough of those guys. But according to I wanted to ask you, Mr. Marquis, you were a former Illuminatist, is that right?
Yes, I was a seventh-generation Illuminati witch. You see, my family's background goes all the way to 1789 in the Illuminati. And at the time, as I said, I was a seventh-generation Illuminati witch.
Okay. I was actually from an Illuminati family, too, although my dad broke out. But my uncle is one of the top assassins to the Bush family. And,
okay.
So, you know, we come from a CIA family, like deep, you know. But anyway, and I knew quite a bit of this stuff about, you know, these occultic holidays because we grew up in and out of it, sort of. But I just wanted to know, is going back to the whole thing that you were talking about the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, wasn't that also in the when Adam and Eve were kicked out of Eden, that the angels gave them bars of gold and then some frankincense and some other things, like it could have been myrrh, I'm not sure exactly, but in the first and second books of Adam and Eve it talks about it, and they said that
those books, I know the ones you're talking about, those are known as pseudepigraphic books or non-canonical books. You see, they were not considered divinely inspired. You see, there was 3 measurements to determine if any book was considered to be divinely inspired or not, and those books were anything but considered canonical. Now, just to give you another example, if we look at the Book of Maccabees, now, the great historical books, they tell us a lot about the war of Judas Maccabee, you know, against the Roman Empire. I mean, it's just about the Maccabean Wars. But they're not canonical because they didn't meet the 3 marks. Though I will tell you, they are excellent historical books, but that's all they are.
Okay.
The books of Adam, as you were saying, those are not considered canonical books. If nothing else, if I remember, those particular books were written by the Gnostics during, I think it was the 1st or 2nd century A.D.
Okay. And the other thing, also, I wanted to say something about today, Halloween.
Yes.
And from what I know about the occult, isn't it true that more men, women, and children are sacrificed today than any other day?
Well, it would have been on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because it's a 3-night fire festival, but you're right. You see, if we go by the FBI files, accordingly, 1 million people are missing every year. 950,000 usually show up again, but 50,000 are missing every year. And you want to guess where?
Where?
On the altars of Satan, where they're being sacrificed.
That, and I heard that also that they're alien food as well. You know, the interdimensionals come, and this happens all over the world, though. So, I mean, that's another way they are disappeared. So that human sacrifices are food for these beings.
Doc, is there any geographically hot location or location that's hotter for this type of activity, human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, than others globally?
Globally, yes. Just go to the countryside in England. Particular hot spots you can find also in California. Excuse me, let me think for a second. California, you would find major hot spots outside of Boston, New York. Actually, more closer to the city, New York, than you would in Boston. Bavaria, Germany. Oh, my goodness, I'd have to sit down and really write this out again. It's been so long since I've thought about it.
Well,
yeah, there are considerable hotspots, globally speaking, and in America, where you're going to see a sudden rise in people missing or animals missing because, you have your Satanists out there practicing the rites of animal sacrifice, and that's not counting those people in Voodoo, Palmayambo, or Santeria, where their gods, all of them demand some sort of animal sacrifice. So, yeah, it's quite a long list.
Interesting. Caller, anything else, dear?
No, I just wanted to add that in South America, particularly Brazil, and also in India, a lot of the untouchables are taken in sacrifice. Brazil, a lot are taken in sacrifice.
You would find it in Brazil, hon, and Cuba, especially because they're heavy into Santeria there. And interesting enough, it's believed that Santeria was one of the reasons Fidel Castro came into power. You see, because when he stood behind the podium, as soon as he was, he became the dictator of Cuba, well, these doves seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Some landed on the podium he was speaking at. One was actually on top of his hat, and I've got the photos to prove this. And one of the gods in Santeria, uses the dove as a blessing of their approval. So when the crowds who were practicing Santeria, among other things, saw those doves landing on him on the podium and such, there was, cheers going up and down because supposedly the gods were blessing this man.
Wow. That's incredible. Thank you, caller. We're going to move on to other calls as we have a bank of callers, but God bless you, and thanks for your insight. Area code is 617. We're going to come to you now. You're up next, live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report. What's your question?
Massachusetts.
Wow. What a feast tonight. Joe, Doug, and Doc Marquis.
And Sheila.
Unbelievable. I've been listening for the past week. You guys have a great show. The reason why I came to you is because of Doc Marquis. Times on the show and anything. And Doc didn't mention this in his newsletter this morning, but that's okay. This radio appearance, anyway. I had a feeling. A couple of things. I'm looking at a picture right now. I love the stories that your dad tells. By the way, he told a really good one the other night. I was just about when he was recording the FBI guy. Anyway, I'm looking at a picture sent from George W. Bush. Actually, George H.W. Bush. Daddy Bush, from Walker's Point, Kennebunkport, Maine, but signed 30/31/90 at White House to Kenny Young, my dad, who's the head of the concierge at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston. From our little, thanks for the T-shirt, from our little place up here to yours down there, George H.W. Bush. Now, what we are fighting, brothers, is principalities and powers, not people. I've met the Bushes. They're all really good, nice people. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have to set something clear, I think, Doc. There's this thing going around that says that the Illuminati has to tell the public what's going on, and that you can see this in Hollywood films and there's that word again, and all that. Do the Illuminati the guest last night was talking about seeing flags burning at football games and baseball games and Olympics, and do the Illuminati have to tell us? And God bless you all, by the way.
No, they don't have to tell a thing, but you see, the reason they're doing it, and they've been doing this now since the mid-30s, they've been using the radio, television, and movies to put out their messages, not to the public, because the public won't understand what they're seeing, but to all their followers, globally speaking, to prepare them for what's coming next. You see, before the advent of radio, communications between fellow illuminists were to say extremely difficult is understating it, because at the most you could hope to get the messages out in time, via the Pony Express or through the railroads that was sending out mail and whatnot. And I can show you Illuminati documents that are coded. Now, it was still being put out there, but no one would know what it was because it wasn't meant for them. It's the same thing when you're watching certain things on the radio, listening to certain things on the radio or on televisions or in movies. Yes, they're doing this because the public doesn't know what they're talking about normally. But I've been, by the grace of God, been running this ministry for a little bit more than 35 and a half years now. And times have changed. I have noted that people are finally waking up, thanks to shows such as Doug and Joe's and others I've appeared on, and other people are out there who are fighting the good fight, along with Sheila, myself, and others. Now, a quick example, a classic example I could give you, as far as it's right in their face, they don't know what they're looking at, and Joe and Doug, you're going to love this one, the Illuminati playing cards.
Aren't those that's disgusting, those cards, that how they're just hidden in plain sight.
Aren't they telling? Aren't they telling a myriad of plans the Illuminati are fulfilling, and that they plan these things sometimes decades ahead of time?
Doc, I would have
We're talking about, obviously, if you've seen the cards, 9/11 with the Twin Towers coming down in the Pentagon. And if you look at the cards in the story, supposedly the planes were heading to destroy the Capitol and the White House. But the Illuminati cards said they wouldn't be touched, and they weren't touched. And the first person we blamed would have been Saddam Hussein. And, of course, we went after him. There's the Saddam Hussein card right there. Let's talk about the death of Princess Diana of Wales, the BP oil spill, the Fukushima Daiichi power plant disaster, on and on. And recent, and I wish I would have talked to you guys sooner, because you know what? In the Illuminati playing cards, now Joe and Doug and Sheila, I'm sure you three are well aware that Ebola is a flesh-eating bacteria that eats you from the inside out and leaves these giant sores and bubbles and such all over the body when you're in the fourth stage, correct?
Correct, yeah, and they're in the Illuminati cards, too.
Well, I've got the Illuminati playing cards that already talk about it.
Well, okay, there's one thing I just want to quickly, before we move on to the next caller, I just disagree with one thing that person said. I do not think that George W. Bush, I don't think any of the Bush old Skull and Bone Club are nice people, so I'm just going to, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, outwardly, outward appearances and the decorum is deceiving, to be sure. All right, let's go back to the phones. Joe, go ahead.
Area code 813, you're up next. Thank you for holding. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Doc Marquis and Sheila.
813, you're up. All right.
Hello?
That was. Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Hi. Sorry, I put the phone down. Hi, Doc, I have kind of two questions. Here, let me take you off the speakerphone. I had, one kind of a question. Did you hear about this Virgin spacecraft that crashed today in California?
Yes.
I kind of thought, when I heard that, I seen, you say the Illuminati tells you what they're doing. It's kind of like a way of saying, we're sacrificing virgins on Halloween. It's just kind of...
Well, believe it or not, you're absolutely right. Because believe it or not, there are such things mentioned in the playing cards also.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Because, what I find strange about it is there was one person that died, and then some the other survivors survived because they had a parachute, or they parachute.
Well, that's just it, right. The plan was to have someone or all of them die as a sacrifice.
Wow. I thought maybe one of them did the killing and got, had the parachute, and the other ones didn't work. I don't know. It's kind of weird, But
no, it's not weird if you understand the belief system and the inner workings of the Illuminati. It was a perfect sacrifice to Samhain, the Lord of the Dead, or as we better recognize him as, Satan.
Wow. Kind of a replay of the burning Wicker Man, hey, Doc?
Oh, well, the Wicker Man is one of the most ancient of all the ceremonies within the Druid practice, because a week before the Nights of Samhain began, the Druids would send out the Celtic tribal members, and they would gather up thousands and thousands of wicker reed so that they could build a giant human effigy that stood about 25 to 30 feet in height. It had multiple cages built throughout it, and they would also build extra, regular square cages on the ground. This is where, after the Druids went out and did their versions of trick-or-treat, they would put the human sacrifice, the people who were still alive, in the Wicker Man and in the cage, and towards the end of Samhain, the wicker cage would catch fire, and all of those people inside of the Wicker Man would be sacrificed to Samhain. Now, nowadays, they've actually brought back, and this has terrified me when I saw the first one happen, in the middle of the Nevada desert, they brought back the Wicker Man, except they're calling it the Burning Man. Anyone, you can look this up online, look it up, use a word search, put in the Burning Man or the Wicker Man, and you will see that these people have brought back the ancient pagan practice of the Wicker Man, and those people who are attending, there's tens of thousands of them now, are all in the occult in one form or the other for the most part.
Wow. Well, that's strange because the crash actually occurred over a desert, I believe, today. I mean, you're talking about deserts and
yes,
stuff.
It did. Wow. I don't remember which one, though.
They talked about, they did talk about going over to New Mexico, but they said that California was where the crash site was. So.
Oh, my goodness. If it ever landed in Roswell, we'd hear it all again.
You might want to go back and read an article about it, do some research, and you'll find all kinds of stuff in it. My other question was, I seen a video a while back. I think it was a guy that was a Seventh-day Adventist put it out on YouTube, and he said that all these occult worshiping places, like whenever they do human sacrifices locally, and he went to this house that was all boarded up and abandoned, and he says they buy houses in front of graveyard sites on purpose, and they have ways of getting kids in and out of them. I don't know. Is that common?
Well, hon, to be honest, the truth of the matter is, they could put it in front of the graveyard or in the back of my yard, as far as I'm concerned. But one thing we have to understand: the Bible makes it very clear that when a person dies, their soul goes either to hell or to heaven. There's no coming back. There's no doing the Casper the Friendly Ghost thing here. If there are any ghosts a person seeing, you're looking at a demon that is purposely taking on the visage of a departed soul of someone you probably know, because you would be more readily to accept that person as a ghost than a stranger. So this is just another, shell game as far as, the demons go. Because, as I stated, hon, God makes it very clear you do not come back once you're in heaven or hell.
Amen. I agree with you that. Amen. That's why I call them familiar spirits, because they're familiar with you.
Very good. Call them familiar spirits, because that's what they are. They're demons disguising themselves as the soul of a departed person you probably know.
I agree. I quite agree. Well, thank you for answering my two questions, and
you're more than welcome.
Thanks for the call, ma'am. You have a great night. God bless you. You take care.
God bless you, too. Bye.
All right. Moving right along. Some fantastic calls. We got some more lined up. We're going to go to area code 706 next. 706, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Sheila Zilinski and Doc Marquis.
Hello?
How you doing?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, we can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, well, I've never called in anywhere, but I love your show, Doug and Joe, and Sheila, you are my absolute favorite. And Doc, I think you're awesome.
Sheila.
Thank you.
Okay, what I listened to the people or the lady the first hour, and not to be controversial, but I'm a born again Christian, but I know
Amen.
for a fact that tonight is for Satanists is about human sacrifice and worshiping the devil, and in every small community throughout our country where people belong to him, that's what they do. And I think that these holidays are extremely dangerous, and I think for Christians we need to stand up and not take part, because it's not casual fun. It's not, it isn't. It's dangerous, and we're not to be a part of those things. And I just feel really strongly about that. And I appreciate what you do and how you are trying to wake up the ones that are.
I want to thank you for that. And I want to tell you something I put up in my yard, and all my neighbors, every single one of them in my whole block, probably 10 blocks down, have the pumpkins and the ghouls, the ghosts, everything. It's all, my neighborhood looks like a sci-fi. But you know what I put up in my yard? A big sign that says Psalm 91, and that's in the front of my yard. And so there you go. So
Sheila, you're awesome. Thank you for taking my call, and just keep up the good work. I mean, y'all are great. Thank you.
I saw something on Facebook today where a Christian put a sign on their front step. It says, the only ghost that lives here is the Holy Ghost.
I like that, Doc. Thank you, guys.
And, let me just make one last Bible reference here, if I may.
Okay.
To that caller and to the man who thinks, it's okay, this is fun. The Bible tells us we're supposed to live in the world, but we're not supposed to be partakers of it.
Yes. Amen to that. Thanks, Doc.
So how can we take on these holidays and not partake of the world?
Right.
I mean, let's face it, hypocrisy looks good on no one.
Exactly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for the call.
Thank you,
I think it's important. I think it's just really important for people to remember, too, Doc, that when you are participating in these things, you really open the door for demonic. I would call it more like a open entryway for that, them to wreak havoc with you. And people will have problems after Halloween. I guarantee it. If they're Christians and you're partaking, I just really know there's going to be some attachment, some affliction, some, wreaking havoc. So, don't agree with Sheila, but do what you want. I just think why walk on that side?
Mhm. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Okay,
all right, let's go to the next caller. We're going to go to area code 772. We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi, guys. I was listening to you. I was thinking about the first guest you had on. I just had to turn it off, and I just came back to it when Sheila and Doc came on. It just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, I wanted to ask a question to Doc, and I also want to make a statement about the Halloween thing here. Just like Doc said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I keep going back to that soldier that put his hands out to catch that ark. He had good intentions, but it was against what God had said to do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Excellent example because even though we, as you just pointed out, the guy had good intentions. I didn't want the ark to fall down, but what did God say? Anyone aside from a Levitical priest who touches the ark will die. God means what he says. God's not kidding around. Who touched the ark died. When he says don't participate in these holidays, spiritually you're going to start dying.
That's right. Question, Doc. When you were talking about the gifts that were brought to Jesus and Mary and Joseph, I think back to Daniel. Daniel never had family, but he was a wealthy man. Could those gifts, that money, that wealth, could it have possibly come from Daniel?
Well, it's possible because, you see, in that region of the world, hon, frankincense and myrrh, along with certain other perfumes, were already, shall we say, in production. I hate to use such a trivial word, but, for lack of a better explanation, they were already in production, and they were extremely difficult to make, just like when we look at Solomon. Okay, just another quick example here. When the Queen of Sheba looked upon him, according to the description of the Bible, this guy was covered in the royal purples, blues, reds. He had all types of jewelry and everything. Purple, royal purple, was the most difficult of all colors to come by in those days, because the ancient method of extracting purple was actually to gather seashells from the shore, because if you've ever picked up seashells, you'll notice that they have a lot of them has different colors on it and such. Well, they would take the ones that had streaks of purple in it, take little knives, and just scrape it into a basket or a wooden bowl. And once they had enough, it would take a ton of this stuff, but they would bring it back and boil it to where they could extract the color, and then they could take whatever fabric and dye it. But I understand they had to keep it in the dye, I think it was either 2 weeks or a month before it would stay on permanently. But as I said, this was a very long and difficult process just to be able to make purple. And to make the perfumes were just as difficult. That's why it costs so much.
Okay. All right, thanks for taking my call. Doug, Joe, have you heard about the other beheading? I didn't know. I'll take my answer offline, guys.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your call, and we're going to put you back in the cube, and then we'll answer you right now. But, yeah, we heard in Oklahoma there was a third beheading. They're saying an attempted beheading, but the person's head was literally done 99% severed from their body. Again, they're not relating this to any type of religious extremism. The news is not, but we know the truth behind that.
Well, when I examined the others, there was obviously a religious element to them, but with this one, yes, especially in Oklahoma, folks, if you don't know what's going on there, they just held, in Oklahoma City, they just held, a satanic ritual there because illegally it couldn't be stopped, but some elements could be taken out. Then some guy, they don't know who, but it could have been a Satanist, who drove his truck right into, the Capitol where they have the Ten Commandments, and that thing has been broken and is shattered on the ground. They are going to repair it, by the way. They're going to put up a new one. And now we have this beheading. I mean, folks, what's going on in Oklahoma?
In black masses, what was that? The Baphomet temple or interactive display that's been set up?
Yeah, it's properly known as the mezzanine goat head.
Okay, mezzanine goat head. Okay.
Yeah, mezzanine goat head.
There was an earthquake, I believe, or a series of earthquakes. Either from Kim told me about this, or Maria Canise, the author of Prepare for Persecution, had sent me an email earlier about the earthquakes, or earthquakes, whatever, multiple, in Oklahoma. So, what is going on in Oklahoma, Doc?
Yeah.
Sheila?
I mean, it looks like one or two things, or it could be a combination of both. It could be very well. You see, Oklahoma especially Oklahoma City, is a stronghold for Christianity. I mean, I know of various ministries there, and I mean, you know some of them yourselves, Prophecy in the News, Southwest Radio Bible Ministries, I know other people who have their own ministries there. Of course, obviously, a ton of churches, bookstores, Christian bookstores, that is, and it looks like, whether the Christians realize it or not, the people in the occult world has declared war. I've seen this too often in the past. I've seen churches literally brought down because they would not heed the warnings. This is, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain reality to you. We live in a physical universe, 3 dimensions, height, width, and depth. But there is a much greater reality going on here, and that's in the spiritual world, where God resides, where the angels of God's heaven reside, where the demons reside, because they cannot go beyond the boundaries of the earth. And they themselves are pitching a battle that is older than we know of. This is going on right now, ladies and gentlemen. And for my brothers and sisters out there, you need to wake up and start smelling the cappuccino, because this is a spiritual battle. You cannot, participate in, these earthly things and be used of God. Revelation chapter 3 teaches us the 7th and last church age is the Laodicean one. We're living in it right now. And by Christ's own words, he said that the vast majority of Christians these nowadays are lukewarm, and he can't use them. People who are lukewarm are fence walkers. They will not commit to the left side or to the right side. They're walking the fence, and Christ himself said, I can't use you. Now think of this. Ladies and gentlemen, think of this for a second. How would you feel if your own father, your own earthly dad, walked up to you right now, pointed the finger at you, and looked at you and said, you are no good to me? And how much greater is the condemnation for those Laodicean Christians when Christ himself points the finger out and says, you are no good to me. I can't use you, so I will spit you out of my mouth.
Wow. Powerful.
You want to be a Christian? You keep saying, I want to be blessed of God. I want to be used of God. Well, how can you be blessed or used of God when you are still participating in these occult holidays? And I'm not going to take any excuses. You can say, well, I have good intentions. You can say, we just do it for the sake of the kids. You can say, like the Catholic Church said, we candy coated it, Christianized it, and it's okay now. Well, guess what? God says it is not okay. And if you want to be blessed or used of God, then you better ship up and start doing things God's way, because he's certainly not about to do it yours.
Well
said. Amen. Wow. Very powerful, Doc. I'll tell you. Wow. And that really is it. I mean, we've got to make a decision. We've got to come to terms with what all of these pagan holidays, the pagan origins of the holidays, and the fact, and
above and beyond that, we have to make the decision, as Doc was referring to earlier, are we going to be for the Lord, or are we going to be for the devil? And being indifferent is, if not worse than being for the devil, it's, being indifferent. As my dad says, the opposite of hate is not love. It's the opposite of love is indifference. And being indifferent, as Doc said, as Revelation states, the Lord will spew you out of his mouth for being lukewarm, for not choosing one side or the other. He'd rather you be against him than to be indifferent towards him. And we have to choose whether we're going to spiritually and individually be part of his bride, his body, his church, or if we're going to be against it, because those are the only two sides that we will fall on as human beings.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Doc, we've got like a dozen email questions here. Of course, you can email the studio directly. If you go to HagmannHagmann.com, click on Contact Us, and fill out the form with your question, and we will do our best to put it on. One question here actually represents probably 3 or 4 different questions of the same. The question, I'm sorry here, I lost my place. There we go. Okay. The question here, Doc, involves the Antichrist. do you believe? Okay, and I know I having watched your latest DVD, Dictators of the Illuminati, and I know kind of your I know your series and haven't watched your series. Do you believe, Doc, the Antichrist, the actual man the flesh person, is alive today? This coming, the primary email coming from Jeff in Colorado. Jeff, thank you for your email.
Absolutely, yes. No doubt about it. You see, when we consider very carefully the description of the Antichrist, where he's from, what he's going to be doing, so on and so forth, add to that I am convinced we are living in the end times. In order for the Antichrist to take over, well, he has to be alive today and somewhere around 35 to 40 years old. Because this is going to be a person, politically speaking, who's unknown. But suddenly he's going to have seemingly an overnight meteoric rise in the political realm, because this individual is going to, once again, seemingly have all the answers to all the problems. And if we are indeed in the end times, that means he has to be preparing right now in the wings to take over.
Interesting. All right. The second part of that question, the bloodline of this individual, any comment on the bloodline of the...
Well, this is interesting. This is very interesting. Now, according to Jewish teaching, and I've spoken to a number of different rabbis on this topic in the past. Now, if I recall, there was one particular tribe of the original tribes of Israel that was thrown out of the tribes because of something heinous they did. And I think...
Tribe of Dan?
It was either Dan or Manasseh. I can't remember which. I'll have to look this up. But it is believed, because that tribe was disowned, that it's from that tribe, whichever one was disowned, the Antichrist comes from. Because we find out, according to the scriptures, that whoever this Antichrist person is, he comes from Jewish stock. So, it could very well be. I'm not saying it's definite. I'm saying it could be. It would be interesting if it was true that whatever that disowned tribe was, the Antichrist could come from.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, that's still taught. The rabbis still teach that to this very day.
Very interesting. All right. Carol from Laguna Beach, California, wants to know, in your estimation, Doc, is the Illuminati, the power brokers, are they on schedule for the creation of a one-world government, one-world religion, and one-world economic system? Are they on schedule, behind schedule, or ahead of schedule?
Sadly, they are right on the mark. They're on schedule. As you know, I've been doing this for 55 years of my life, either inside of the cult or outside as a born-again Christian, trying to warn people about the Illuminati, what's going on in the Illuminati, their plans for a new world order, so on and so forth. You know that. And in those 55 years, I have never seen their timetable go off, not even once. Now, I've seen some of their plans where people have attempted to derail them, and if enough Christians got together, they could do it. But even then, they always had a backup plan, and that was enforced, and it kept everything on schedule. I have not seen them miss the mark yet.
Okay. Let's see here. One more question I think we have time for. This comes from Joe from listening live, by the way, from London, UK.
My old stomping grounds.
All right. Well, could you please ask Doc?
Well, I was born in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Okay. Interesting.
Well, I don't tell anyone my age either, but, unfortunately it's still there.
You look 29, so.
Yeah.
You don't owe me a cup of coffee anymore, you wonderful liar.
Have you, okay, the question is this. Could you please ask Doc if you have worked out what the new block on the Georgia Guidestones meant? Of course, that was that block that was ferreted into the corner.
Yeah, I know. I have actually... I meant to look at it deeper because, you see, I had already seen certain things on that new block that was put there. One thing I want everyone to understand about the Georgia Guidestones. Now, I think it was DVD 10, I was there doing a live shot, shooting the whole thing, showing everyone what it's all about, the whole thing. And one thing I can definitely tell you, that was not erected by the Illuminati. A lot of people are making a lot of brouhaha about that they want to drop the world's population to 500 million. Well, that's not only not biblical, it's not even part of the Illuminati belief system. What they do want to do is drop the world's population by 50% because then they say they've got a manageable, listen to the word, a manageable number. They think we've got too many people right now, so they want to drop it down by half because when we're talking about a machine as big as the Earth, someone has to run it. And 500 million people aren't going to be able to take care of all the technology, let alone be able to run it efficiently. You need a greater number than that. Let's just think about the computers alone. How many people it takes, just to run, let's say, Microsoft. Or let's take a look at how many people it would take just to keep the power grids up, let alone run all the planes, the trains, and things like that. This, and then do all the gathering of the food. This takes more than 500 million people. This is a big place we live in. So you need more than 500 million. That's just common sense. But if I go by the specific writings of the Illuminati, they want to drop it by 50%.
Wow. Either way, it's going to be it would be, wow, just a massive culling of humanity. Doc, we've reached the end of the program. Sheila, thank you so much. Would you do the honors of closing out the program, Sheila?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I want to thank you, Doc, on this. I really want to thank Doc for coming on, especially on this hallowed night from some people, not by us. But anyway, I just want to thank everyone for listening tonight. Again, we're going to have a great show tomorrow night. You're going to want to stay tuned for that because Russ Dizdar is coming on with some spiritual warfare principles. Pastor Stephen Anderson, you know him from the Alex Jones documentaries, and it's going to be a really good show. And thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Well, God bless you, Sheila. Doc, God bless you, and stay safe. Both, Doc, stay safe, my friend. We do worry.
I always let my friends who are always hanging around me, who most people can't see, take care of that part of it.
Oh, amen. And with that, folks, we've reached the close of the program. Again, our thanks to Doc Marquis and our first-hour guest, Chris Putnam, and
Woodward.
My goodness, I was tongue-tied there. And, of course...
thanks, Doc. Thanks, Sheila. And thank you to all our guests from the first hour. It's been a fantastic show. I hope you all have a great weekend. We have an extra hour this weekend. Whether you use that hour for work or whether you use it for sleep, use it wisely. And we will see you back here tomorrow night with Sheila and Russ Dizdar and Pastor Anderson. And we'll be back Monday live here at 8 p.m. God bless each and every one of you. Have a great night.
Beep.